Serious? When and or how did you realize that the person you were dating at the time was not the person you would want to spend the rest of your life with? After getting upset at me for I'm still not sure what, she screamed at me that she wanted to go back home to Australia, and instead of feeling hurt or sad or angry, I just felt relieved. Relief that she might actually go and that I might actually get a break from her was the biggest indicator that it wasn't going well that I could have unknowingly been exposed to. I had a similar experience. Things were rough, and I chose to spend a long weekend with my family instead of with her. When I realized how much I was dreading going back to see her again, I knew that was it. At my birthday party I ate a slice of pizza and she yelled at me that I didn't do any sit-ups that day and I can't eat pizza. Everyone there just stopped and looked stunned. My husband tells this story about his last ex. They went to a wedding together where the couple had been together around 10 years. It was a wedding themed cookout on somebody's property out in the country, where they interrupted the festivities for less than 10 minutes for the ceremony. When the bride came walking down the aisle, they just asked people to clear a space and stand on either side. The groom was literally bouncing on his toes. He was so excited to be marrying her. My husband looked at the groom, then looked at his girlfriend, and thought I'm never going to feel that way about this woman. Damn. That means your husband was bouncing on his toes when you came down the aisle. This post makes me happy. Technically happened after we broke up. During the breakup she used "you can't spoil me the way I deserve" as one of the reasons. That bounced around in my head for a few weeks before it really kind of clicked and opened my eyes to how unhealthy the relationship had been. Gaslighting. Basically went to a psychiatrist only to find out I'm totally fine. Turns out some people can't face their own problems so they blame others. When I found myself typing signs of abuse in relationships in Google. This hits a little too close to my homepage. I did the same thing. I checked all the boxes, and then it took me 3 more years to leave. Glad to know you're out. He said that he would have to give up weed if he wanted to get a job in his field. His job involved a lot of heavy machinery. Even if you aren't high on the job, if a mistake is made and you pee hot, it would be an automatic firing. That's fine and dandy. But his plan was to start faking a back injury now so he could get painkillers legally from the doctor to get high, because nothing bad has ever came from that. I've seen a lot of people go down the opioid path, including his best friend at the time who had just started taking H-tabs and went from a young man going places in life to a strung out junkie in about 6 months. I left and I never looked back. When she quit her job and I started finding bags of crushed beer cans. A new bag each day in a different spot than the last. Another when I found a burnt spoon along with a dirty swab of cotton, a hoodie string and a needle. When she tried to convince me that being flirty with lots of other guys was totally normal and that no one gets hurt by it, didn't actually end it until she started really emotionally cheating on me. When I found out that she'd been sleeping with multiple guys behind my back, then I was the bad guy for not trusting her. Frick that noise. 1-800-HO-NO-MO. She wanted kids, 100%. I love kids, but I love going home after spending time with them more. Thought about this for a year. Tried to convince myself I'd be a great dad, everyone says so. I couldn't take it anymore. We had a good long cry about it, and made the call. That's a really healthy way to tackle that difficult situation. Good on you for recognizing you couldn't provide a key factor in what she wanted in a relationship and being mature enough to let her go be with someone who would. When you get into a relationship, you're either going to marry, spend the rest of your life with them, or break up. My ex had a poor perspective on mental health and array of other things, and I couldn't bear the thought of someone like that being the father of my children. As the child of a guy who thinks most mental issues are made up, I think you made a good choice. When she started involving her toddler too much in our relationship, I really liked her and her son, but there was a point where she started making me too much of a father to her son before we really had the time to know one another enough for me to be comfortable with it. When there are kids involved, I think there needs to be more time involved before he or she is brought in. Children get attached, and I don't think it's healthy to introduce a significant other too early in a relationship. I'm in the middle of this right now. My kid is 3. I've been dating a dude for almost 5 months. He's met my kid twice and I still feel like it's too soon for them to have a relationship. Coincidentally, this dude is a freaking stellar dad to his own kids. I just don't want people in and out of my kid's life. I want to be really sure. He told me that it was my fault that he had to cut ties with his longtime online friend, the woman he cheated on me with. My first girlfriend got angry at me for buying a cheap gift she couldn't show off to her friends. I had spent $200. She would also constantly call me and yell at me for being with my friends, would get angry if I didn't bring her chocolate when she had her period, and finally told me that she pictured herself with someone wealthier even though she didn't work. I ended it shortly after that. When I realized that seeing them was a chore and no longer a pleasure. In my opinion, routine has a major importance in a relationship, and when you can't find yourself happy in everyday routine, I think that's the sign you have to run. I was a very naive young teenager and the popular bad boy wooed me. Together we became fairly popular. I just knew we were going to get married and live this sort of dream life together. One day, long after being in denial of all the times he very literally cheated on me in front of friends, did and sold drugs, and joined the army without discussing it with me, having a relationship on the side with a girl in his platoon. Then 2 weeks into his leave was partying with girls and friends after I had not seen him for a whole year and still not coming to visit me. I finally told myself, I can't live my whole life like this, just him always being on his own agenda and putting me on the shelf. I finally paid myself the self-respect I direly needed to and broke up with him. He was so used to having me under his thumb that he tripped over his words on the phone. I heard from friends later that he was asking if I might want to get back together with him. At a party a couple years later he would not leave me alone. It was sad. I am sad for the very naive young teenager I was, and all the many times he was literally a W behind my back, so many lies and so much acting, but that relationship lasted at least 3 years and taught me an incredible amount. I'm proud of teenage me for being brave enough to be on my own and know what's good for me. I've been there. I still cringe of all the bulls I had to put up with. Those days are over now though. It was my high school sweetheart of 3 years, and I had joined the military a few months after graduating high school. While in boot camp, I met so many people and other men who were interested in me. I never cheated, and speaking with other people in their lives made me realize there was no future with him. He was lazy, and had no ambition in his life at all besides to become a professional YouTube video game player, or sell weed, which at the time I was fine with because it's what he wanted to do and I was madly in love with the kid. But then after I joined the military and we made plans to get married, he decided he would not have to get a job because me being in the military means we would get so much money, which, if anyone else reading this is in the military, knows that this is certainly not true, and this is not what I wanted at all. And then, when I was thinking maybe I was being harsh and just having doubts, he never sent me a single letter during BMT, and later found out the dog we owned together had been poisoned and he had refused to take the pup to the vet, even when my mom offered to take him and pay for the vet bill, which I found out after I graduated boot camp. Whoa, that's a pretty impressive crap stain you had there. Sorry about the dog, but I'm glad you bounced out of that. When I realized I didn't want to be stuck dealing with his crazy narcissistic mother until one of us died. He was a good man. He was just raised to believe he was worthless and that caused him to surround himself with people who used him. It was exhausting having the same conversation with him every month about when his freeloading mother would move out or at least find a job. We went broke and lost a lot because of her. He didn't even see it as a problem. I was the voice of reason in that house and it got old quick. That's a shame. Sometimes doing your best to help people doesn't fix them, and ends up draining you. He was paranoid and controlling. He would do all in his power to prevent me seeing my friends, and it wasn't long before he dropped all of his friends. Wanted it to just be us two in our own little universe, never interacting with anyone else outside of the workplace, which to him was frustratingly unavoidable. Got quite creepy, borderline abusive. When I turned 30 and realized after 5 years that this guy was never going to his crap together and I had actually gotten further from my goals during that time than closer. When I got home from 5 weeks overseas without him visiting my family to an absolutely disgusting pigsty of a house and he ignored me all night to play computer games. A family friend told me he doesn't look at you the same way you look at him after meeting my ex-boyfriend for the first time. She told me this when we had a moment alone, and my sisters agreed with her. No one has ever been that honest with me about their observations of my relationship. Usually those comments would be made after the fact when the relationship ended. Really opened my eyes about the whole thing. Had doubts during dating, but I'm not exactly any woman's dream, so continued. Had serious doubts about 5 years in, tried to break up. Breakup didn't go well. Stayed together and had kids. We're so much a part of each other's lives now that I wouldn't know how to live. I mean, financially, breaking up would see me on the streets. Suck it up. I'll be dead in 30 years max. My ex used to say things like I wouldn't manage without her and she would imagine I'd be very depressed without her. Eventually took the plunge and broke up cause she was dragging me down, and I'm in a far better position in life since leaving her. Better relationship, better job, and just overall happier. When another woman contacted me to let me know she was also seeing him and that he was also married with 2 small kids. Also his name wasn't really his name and he was 8 years older than he said. And so many other things. Wow, this one, what a lot for you to process. 12 years in, was told to text before I called so I wouldn't be inconveniently impacting her day, while she had no job and was sitting at home. I was trying to call and encourage her on a job hunt, while I was working 2 jobs. That, and when I told her it was an issue that we hadn't been physical in over a year, psychological issues on her behalf, that I was hitting a wall and needed for there to be forward movement of some sorts, was told, we need to take a break. Flags so red the sun was wincing. I've been there, when you're busting your butt and your partner can't even be bothered to wake up before noon, vainly trying to get them to do something, anything. Feels so much better being single and just having to motivate myself to do crap and not someone else. Early on, when I imagined having kids with this person and absolutely could not see them as a positive parental figure, too self-absorbed, selfish, and always trying to bring others down. When he started talking about when he would ask me to marry me and instead of getting happy, my first thought was what, no. That's when I realized I just wanted this relationship to be a temporary thing. When I realized he never apologized for the things he did wrong. There were times that I would point out that he hadn't apologized and he would always respond I thought I had, and still wouldn't apologize. Also, everything was my fault, even him cheating and lying. I had one that really wanted kids. Me, not so much. Also, she was very needy for attention and validation, more than a normal person. I wasn't up for that. I honestly should come with a disclaimer label to clarify that kids should not at any point be expected of me. Considering I'm only 21, I've had 3 breakups that revolved around me not wanting kids. I found this TED talk by a woman who left an abusive relationship and she said something like, the thing is, I didn't know I was in an abusive relationship. What was happening was that I was an extremely strong individual who was making sacrifices to help someone who desperately needed my help, and it all just clicked. It was around that time she started mentioning getting married and my only feeling in response to it was revulsion. When he wouldn't take an interest in any of my hobbies, but fully expected me to be on board with his. When he wouldn't hang out at my social events with me, but fully expected me to be there for his. I'm no one's trophy husband. When it finally hit me how stupid he was, highlights include asking me why French people don't celebrate Thanksgiving and then positing the theory that it wasn't politically correct enough for them, not knowing how to microwave a potato, not filling out or submitting applications to jobs I helped him find, then blaming immigrants for edging him out. The jobs mostly went to white guys, they just filled out and submitted their paperwork. Evidently my ex thought all he needed was to finish the interview portion of the job fair we were attending, not wanting me to get a soft pretzel because he thought they were as hard as mini pretzels or pretzel sticks and would hurt my teeth. Being absolutely stumped when I handed him one of my sports band-aids instead of a typical one. Getting mad at me for spoiling the twist that Darth Vader is Luke's father in 2015, after he told me he'd seen the original trilogy. He thought the prequels were the original trilogy. That list just got more amazing as I continued reading it. Thank you. The constant guilt tripping, physical and psychological abuse. I got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. But there is something that stuck out the most when we were falling apart. I struggled with depression and self-harm for several years. His final words to me were, "Your scars are a permanent reminder of the terrible person you are inside." Absolutely destroyed me, and it's something that I will never forget. 2 years down the road and I still remember the feeling. I don't see this one here. So, we were engaged, probably starting to fall out of love but wasn't quite there yet. All my friends disliked him. He was 4 years older than I, and we met when I was 17, which I have no idea why my parents didn't shut that down. Anyway, my senior year of college, I went to a very prestigious school, into a ComC business degree, and he went to a party school with not a good rep, on probably his third major, couldn't make up mind. I told him what the counselor at the school said my starting salary should be. He said no one will pay you that, your girl. Boom, done. When I realized that the majority of my days were spent miserable and worrying, when most days we were just arguing, when asking for change and giving chances upon chances didn't work. I was only 19, but we were together almost 2 years and it was my first relationship, so I had a very deep love for him. I know he loved me, he just could not love me the right way. I had invested so much time in him, but I also realized, dang, I'm still so young. So that's when I broke it off. 2 years later and I'm a better person. I still wish him the best though. When I realized that the breakups were because he had a passing interest in someone else for a while and not some horrible flaw in me, he would realize the passing interest was just that, passing. He would realize I was a pretty good dude and come back. I stopped responding. It sucks and it hurts, but I can't deal with it anymore. It's terrible to realize someone thinks of you as a backup plan. I applaud you for being able to see what was going on and having the strength to cut contact. I let myself be a doormat in a similar situation. I'm glad you got out of that. I am the type of person to give my all or nothing to someone. I fall so deeply in love that their needs become my needs. Well, this happens to get taken advantage of. One night, when my so and I weren't fighting, for once, and everything was wonderful, I took a deep look inward. I realized I wasn't happy. The other person was, so therefore I should be, because I'm doing everything I can to make them happy. But he didn't treat me how I treated him. He didn't love me how I loved him. I was so deep in doing everything perfect to make him happy. I lost myself in the process and wasn't happy at all. I realized then and there I wanted to be with someone who treats me the same way I treat them. We had a cycle of fighting and making up every month. I broke the cycle the first time and then we just never really moved on. We tried a second time and I realized we were just rinsing and repeating. I knew it was done after one major fight, but I couldn't justify breaking up cause we spent so much time together. Ending it would mean that it was all for nothing. So I buckled down and tried to stay in it, but after a few months I realized I was on autopilot. Set weekends, set vacation, set activities, and none of them I was ever happy, but I put a smile on. She's an amazing girl who's going to do amazing things. I know that, and people tell me that when they ask why we didn't work. I only told a few people the truth. I didn't love her anymore. I didn't like me anymore. The relationship made me feel like a failure every day, and it still does. Sorry for the spelling and sporadic jumping around in the story. Just good to get it out there in a place no one knows me, and knowing this will be kept a secret from everyone I know. When I realized I had to change myself as a person for him to accept me, I had to convert to Christianity from Buddhism. Never cuss. Couldn't attend the Air Force Academy. I had to be passive and meek, and I wasn't allowed to hang out with male friends. He had this picture of me as the perfect domestic Christian wife, and that wasn't me. It took me 4 years to figure out that it was not a healthy relationship. I broke up with him in public with my sister sitting a little further back behind him. We didn't know how he would take it, but we knew he wouldn't get physical with 20 other people in a brightly lit public area. He threw a photo and a necklace at me before yelling at me to leave. This was after an hour-long conversation of him trying to persuade me not to leave him. I didn't get to attend the academy because my ex had convinced me it wasn't in my own best interest. But I did join the Air Force and meet my wonderful husband, whom has been nothing but amazing and supportive. Dang. The academy isn't easy to get into either. I'm glad you're happy now and have someone who supports you. You can still commission if you want to become an officer. She wanted me to get out of the army and she didn't want kids at all. I know now the army isn't a career move, but at the time she was so against it. Gave me an ultimatum about owning a motorcycle, saying she'd leave me if I got one. I put in most of the legwork to drive 8.5 hours once a month to see her, flying her down to Georgia to see me. Really just got tired of arguing, so I ended it. I've since moved on and found myself a new woman that just wants what is best for me, and I know I'll eventually marry her. It was only, luckily, our second date when he started spewing homophobic slurs about a couple of friends I had mentioned in passing. I knew he was uncomfortable with gay jokes, but I had mistaken that hatred for awkwardness. The gates broke all open the second he discovered those two gals I have known from uni were getting married. From the "it's unnatural, disgusting" at the start of his rant to his "they just need a good hitting and a dicking after," bleeding with lube him up in the end. I was near tears and gagging in disgust, and I left and didn't turn back. When I realized that I had never been happy with them and that they were abusive, the biggest realization came after my son was born. The first thing my ex-biological father said to me after giving birth was, "Do you have any idea how tired I am? You don't realize how exhausting it is watching someone in labor and have them screaming so close to your ear." I had been in full active labor for 28 hours and had no sleep for 48. Okay, so I figured maybe he just said it without thinking. Then a few weeks later, he started arguing with me about the fact that my hormones were peeing him off, about 12 weeks PP and undiagnosed PND, and I snapped back at him with my baby in my arms. I stood up to lay the baby as his cot and he said, "You want to remember, you're not freaking pregnant anymore, are you, B?" After I laid the baby down, I asked him to repeat what he said, so he did, and with emphasis on B, and he pushed me so hard I fell back. Luckily the bed was directly behind me. If I had been on top of the stairs I would have been at the bottom in no time, and had bruises on my chest for a few days. He acted like it was my fault because I got in his face. I didn't. He stepped to me and pushed me before I could do anything at all. There's a lot more crazy crap about that relationship, but those were the defining moments that made me realize I not only deserved better, but my son didn't deserve to be around that. Witness it or grow up thinking it was normal and right to either treat people that way or to be treated that way. Been free of him for years now, and he has no contact with my son, who is being raised by my partner as his own and is the happiest little boy in the world. My ex pulled the same. You don't know how exhausted I am after I gave birth. He refused to do anything for our newborn because he didn't feel well. It was repulsive. She told me she wanted to get a swastika tattooed on the bottom of her foot because Hitler seemed like a cool person. It didn't last too long after that. That's just a whole other kind of red flag right there. When I realized I had to put on a mask at home and not the other way around, I eventually realized I was noticeably happier and more myself when she wasn't around. I was not happy. They did not respect me. No communication. No common interests. You will know when it's not worth it. You just have to be honest with yourself. You will never meet someone better until you move on. You can do it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.